Hello, hidden gems. What a day day 10 was. Dr. Jennifer Tufts on the stand the majority of the day, getting grilled. It was brutal, honestly. Take a listen to this clip.
Can you just read this paragraph here for us?
No sleep last night. Falls asleep after 40 minutes. Heart racing, severe anxiety, worrying about kids, baby, sleep. Yawns, but not drowsy. Not hyper, pressured speech.
What was that? Not hyper what?
Not hyper, not pressured speech is what I meant. I know it doesn't say not, but that is exactly what I meant.
Wait, when did you see this that you noticed that it did not say not?
I don't care what it says. I know what I meant.
Yeah, I don't care what it says. I know what I meant. Things got tense in that courtroom between Dr. Tufts and Kevin Reddington. I have thoughts about today. We're headed into week 3 of the Lindsay Clancy trial. It's Monday. And I'm going to save those thoughts for a little bit later because we have a lot to go through. Because Monday opened with the defense starting their cross-examination of Dr. Jennifer Tufts. We knew that was going to happen. Reddington first went over her background, typical. She confirmed that she is a psychiatrist and trained at the University of Vermont from 2014 to 2018. And then she had a residency at Boston Medical Center. 4 years, she clarified, not 2, as he tried to claim at first, rotating through psychiatry, internal medicine, inpatient admissions, emergency evals. She said that residents rotate all different aspects of psychiatry as well as internal medicine, so they have a foundational knowledge, right, of all those medical topics. She's also board certified. It's a big deal for doctors. Reddington lingered, though, on the pandemic years, pointing out that much of her residency happened under masks and social distancing. He pushed her on whether she ever touched patients, like shook hands, hugged anyone. She explained that she still worked in person, but some outpatient visits switched to telemedicine after the pandemic, right? From there, he walked through the transition from residency to becoming fully licensed, pointing out that she received her unrestricted Massachusetts license and board certification in September of 2022. Again, remember, Lindsay Clancy killed her 3 children January 2023, so shortly after. She told him that she began practicing independently at Astor Mental Health the month before, though, August 2022. He kept circling back to how new she was in independent practice, right? Which makes sense. Take a listen to this, and then I have thoughts. We'll talk.
So August of 22, you start working at Astor. August of 22, you got your DEA license individually that authorized you to prescribe medication, correct?
Yes.
And it was when that you saw Lindsay Clancy?
I believe our first visit was September 15th
Of
2022.
So you were practicing as a psychiatrist for a little more than a month.
I was practicing independently with my full credentials for about a month, but the training is just immense that goes on before that.
Absolutely, it must be. But that's a residency that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
And you know, in a residency, I mean, all I know is Grey's Anatomy, but I mean, you're working under a doctor, the doctors are supervising you, and they tell you what to do, and then you report to them, correct?
They don't really tell you what to do. They're there as a resource if you need additional support. But I followed many of my own patients. I was the only person in the room with them. And, my notes were signed off by an attending physician, and that attending was available for any support I needed.
So in August of 22, when you started working at Astor, you actually filled out a form for your advertising. Is that correct?
I believe that was handled by other people at the practice.
And who would that be?
Well, we have non-clinical staff that handle the administrative matters.
Okay, but you're a doctor, and you're out there to the public. You're advertising yourself and your services to the public. Is that fair?
I believe, yes. I'm not directing the marketing of our office, but yes.
Okay, never mind your office. I'm talking about you. You had an ad that was on the computer that if somebody wanted to reach out to a doctor, they could see your ad amongst many others, right?
Well, I don't think there was an ad. I think we have a website that had some information about myself.
Okay. Now, in August of 22, up until when you saw Lindsay, how many patients in that month or so had you treated for postpartum psychosis?
How many patients in a month up until that month?
I'm asking you about when you started working in August of 22 for Astor, and you are now on your own as an employee. How many patients had you treated before you saw Lindsay Clancy for postpartum psychosis?
Well, in the span of 1 month, I would say none because it's a very rare disorder.
Okay. But it exists, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And one of the things would be the voices that people hear, right?
That is a symptom of psychosis. Absolutely.
And that's legitimate, isn't it?
It is a legitimate diagnosis.
It's
Absolutely.
not the diagnosis. People that have postpartum psychosis hear voices, do they not?
Many do. The disorder can manifest differently in different people, but yes, many people do hear voices.
How about postpartum depression? How many people in that month or so before you met Lindsay did you treat for postpartum depression?
In the span of 1 month, it's really hard to pinpoint that. Maybe a couple.
Maybe a couple? And do you recall how long you treated them for?
Again, it's hard to really pin down the individuals in a short span of time.
Can you tell the jury what you put in your ad or in the Astor website that you indicated that described you?
I don't recall.
Well, one of the things you did is that you said that you basically were a specialist in postpartum, people that have postpartum psychiatry. You indicated that on the website, didn't you?
Are you able to read the actual document? I don't remember exactly the wording.
You've been working now for how many years now? 3 since you saw Lindsay? Or more?
Almost 4, yes.
You haven't changed your ad on the website, have you?
I have not personally, no.
And you've read it probably a bunch of times, right?
I've read it a couple times, but I don't spend a lot of time on my website.
Okay. Do you recall that you indicated that you were specializing in any particular aspect of psychiatry?
Yes, it probably includes a special interest in women's health, in perinatal psychiatry, in trauma-related disorders, anxiety, and there may be some other things that were mentioned.
Yeah, like women that have babies and they're suffering from postpartum depression, right?
Absolutely.
You advertised that after a month in working for Astor, right?
That's listed as one of my interests, definitely.
And again, forgive me, how many women did you treat for postpartum depression in that month and a half before you met Lindsay?
I don't know, maybe a couple. But I've treated many of them in the residency, which was just immediately before.
So when a person needs to see a psychiatrist, generally they're not well. Is that fair?
Some are not well. It really can vary.
So when someone comes to see a psychiatrist like you, it's because they need help, right?
Yes.
And when they come to you because they need help, for example, with Lindsay Clancy, she came to you because of your ad, right? Or your website for Astor, what you said about yourself.
I don't know exactly how she found us.
Well, do you know why she came to see you?
I'm not sure exactly.
Friday, we spent a long period of time going through your initial or the initial intake that she had to fill out. Is that correct? You recall that?
Yes, we did.
And the district attorney kept asking you, and this is in September, is it September 12th? Is that when that form was filled out?
I believe she completed the form on the 12th. The appointment was on the 15th.
So what does a person do? Do they call you or do they talk to somebody in administration? How do you get the form to fill out?
Yes, our administration handles that.
And what do they do? How does that happen?
They send them the documents, probably by email, and the patient fills them out. It might be all within the portal that we use,
Within the portal?
the patient portal, yes.
Okay, and that means that you go online and you can access Astor Mental Health and then all these little drop-down boxes would come up?
Something like that.
Are you aware? Is it something like that, or are you aware of what it does?
So because I don't handle the scheduling and the sending of forms, I don't know exactly what it looks like.
Well, this is the form that you're giving a person that needs help because they're possibly mentally ill. Is that right?
Yes, and what's important is that I review the forms and we go through
You
them
do?
in the appointment. Absolutely, yes.
Now, understand that your records, Exhibit 219, I believe, the jury will have access to the Tufts records. Okay, you're aware of that, right? You know it's an exhibit
Yes,
because you have talked to the prosecution about what an exhibit is, and you know that your records are now in evidence before this jury, right?
if that's what you say, yes.
I wouldn't take what I say. If you don't know, that's fine.
I don't know the details of how this works.
All right, have you talked to them prior to your testimony?
No,
You haven't talked to the DA's office?
no, not at all.
You're a defendant in a very large lawsuit, are you not?
Yes,
You wouldn't happen to be represented by an attorney, would you?
I am.
And the fact that you have an attorney is your right under the Constitution. It doesn't mean that you're guilty of anything, right?
Right.
Okay. And you know that the outcome of this case is very, very major to the outcome of your lawsuit. Is that right?
I don't actually know that.
Really interesting. Loved hearing a lot of your voices there in chat, a lot of varying opinions. I think this probably is one of Dr. Tuft's most stressful days of her life, thousands of people watching her and judging her on the stand. Did she do everything right? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's talk about Reddington for a little bit. Reddington, a lot of varying opinions here. I'm interested to know what the jury's thinking. A lot of you thinking that he was rude, that he was condescending towards her. Other people thinking he was doing an excellent job for the defense. One thing I also thought was interesting, in fact, I'm going to find this comment. It was a great comment. Yeah, I want to talk about this. Not sure how I feel about it, but I feel the blame is being put on the doctor. But there's only so much they can do when you go home and you're alone. One thing that I think that Reddington is doing a great job on, and that is from a defense perspective, is you're right, he is placing the blame really on somebody else. It's extra interesting to me because this is I always talk about this being a why done it trial, right? It's not a who done it trial, it's a why done it trial. And yet he's kind of like figuring out a way to make it a who done it. There's something called Soddy in law, SODDI. Some other dude did it, Soddy. And in Lindsay Clancy's case, it's pretty clear who the responsible party is. Everybody's agreed to it. Lindsay killed her children. Yet he is finding someone else to blame, which is typically a good defense strategy. He's not outwardly saying that Dr. Tufts killed the children, but he is certainly implying negligence and care that wasn't appropriate for Lindsay Clancy. Now, the varying opinions here, whether the care was negligent or not, is varying, but certainly interesting to see your opinions on this matter. There were some things that I disagreed with that Reddington was saying about her and her expertise, and other things I thought, oh dear, my goodness. But you're right, 4 years of residency and 4 years of medical school. She's certainly more experienced than most of us in psychiatry, except for the psychiatrist in chat. As well as the expert thing was interesting to me too. He kept saying expert. He referred to, sorry, one second. Is my mic? Okay, hello. Is my audio okay? Hello. Anyway, I think other things that Reddington does that are interesting is how he frames things. We'll get into that a little bit later. Because first, the expert, being an expert, really focusing on her lack of experience. You're right, everyone has to start somewhere, but she was a new psychiatrist compared to others with years of experience. Anyway, he moved to the intake form Lindsay filled out on September 12th, the one that the DA had gone through page by page on Friday. He asked how many pages it was. She estimated 10 to 20. He asked who checked the boxes. She said the patient. He asked whether Lindsay disclosed past SSRI use. She said yes, Prozac in nursing school. He asked whether Lindsay reported side effects. She said no. He tried to suggest that she waited for Lindsay to volunteer information. She pushed back, saying Lindsay offered a lot of information on her own and understood her medical history well. And, she knew that she was talking to a nurse. She is well spoken when it comes to medical care, I'm sure. He brought up the alcohol disclosure, the guilt Lindsay wrote about, and reminded her how long the DA had spent on that Friday. She agreed it was part of the picture, but not a major concern. And then he dug right into Lindsay's life, her education, her marriage, her 3 children. He asked whether she knew those details. She said yes, she did. He asked whether she'd ever met Patrick in person, and she said no. Their one interaction was through telemedicine, which Reddington kept referring to as the TV. That was another great thing that he framed. It wasn't telemedicine or Zoom, it was the TV. You saw her through the TV. And that became his next theme, telemedicine, aka TV. He pointed out that every single appointment, 14 in total, was virtual. He referred to it as the television. He emphasized the fact that she never saw Lindsay's full body, right? Which means her nonverbals. He never saw her hands, her legs, any physical tells of distress. She acknowledged that she could not see those things. And I will say this, that is important. I watch trials from home and I watch them in the courtroom. There are things you see in person that you do not see when you're on the television. But she still knew Lindsay was under significant stress despite not being able to see her. He asked if she could hug her, and she explained that wouldn't happen in a regular setting in person either. Psychiatrists usually don't hug their patients. And then he asked why Lindsay came to her in the first place. She looked at her notes and she told him that the reason documented in the record was postpartum anxiety. That's interesting. So not postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. And then Reddington brought in testing. Take a listen.
I see. Postpartum anxiety. Now, as a psychiatrist, meeting with this young woman after a month or so of working as a psychiatrist for Astor, there are tests that you administer to a woman who's in postpartum to find out what type of anxiety they have, right?
Well, there are some screening tests, but the most important thing is what the patient tells you and what my assessment is in the session.
I see. And that would carry through the Tufts evaluations for all 14 of those meetings is what the patient tells you, right?
Yes, and what I observed in the session
Through the telephone.
through the computer.
What, if you can tell me, is the Edinburgh test?
It is a scale that looks at symptoms of postpartum depression.
And when you administer it, that's a major test, isn't it, for a doctor to evaluate a patient for PPD?
I wouldn't say it's a major test.
It's a pretty big one, though, isn't it? It's the only one that measures the postpartum depression, right?
It's a common one.
So what?
Commonly used.
Currently, all right, so when you used it on Lindsay, when was that administered to her?
I did not use it on Lindsay.
Why?
We used the PHQ-9, which
What
is
is PHQ-9?
it's a depression screening form.
That's like generalized anxiety disorder, general depression. It's got nothing to do with a woman suffering from postpartum depression, does it?
I disagree.
Well, do you agree that people perhaps that may know a little more than you determine that the Edinburgh scale is the appropriate scale to administer to a pregnant or postpartum woman?
Stayed as.
You're familiar with the Edinburgh scale, right?
I've heard of it.
And can you explain to me how it's graded?
No, I cannot.
There are 30 questions in it, are there not?
I don't use this scale, so I don't know how many questions there are.
So the Edinburgh scale, do you even know that the cutoff for someone that is depressed in their condition of postpartum would be 15? Anything over that, they're in severe depression?
Okay.
You know that her first Edinburgh test that was administered to her put her at a 23?
Objection.
Overall. Severe depression?
I was not aware of this test. I was not aware that this had been administered to her.
You know, the testing thing is interesting to me. The Edinburgh scale, I think that not every psychiatrist uses the same testing. That is true, actually. Not every psychiatrist needs to use the same testing, but to not know about it was surprising to me, to say she didn't know about that testing because she uses other testing. And I don't think it was a good look. Just that was personal thoughts. But that was one thing. Anyway, from there, Reddington tried to paint her as someone who relied too heavily on what information Lindsay volunteered. Although I will say that is oftentimes how psychiatrists learn information, is what the patient volunteers. But he went for it, and he asked whether it was important for a psychiatrist to know a patient's medical history beyond what they say. And she explained that when patients can advocate for themselves, doctors rely on their reports. He asked whether Lindsay was able to advocate for herself. She said yes across every month she treated her. He then brought up that word, deteriorating, which had come up on Friday. She classified that it wasn't her personal word choice. It was a multiple choice word, right? It was one of the preset options in the electronic chart. She explained that she had to select from a drop down, and that specific aspect of the note is a button where you have to click on one of three choices. And that opened the door for him to attack the technology, attack the technology, Sometimes I wonder if we're relying too much on technology. He pushed the idea that she couldn't freely write what she observed, that she was boxed in by forms and check marks. She kept reminding him that the treatment itself mattered more than the formatting. And she also highlighted the standard safety language in her notes, the part that tells patients to go to the emergency room if they feel they might harm themselves and others. And she confirmed that it appears in every visit. He asked about the self-harm hotline, what it was. She explained it was a number for patients in crisis to reach a trained counselor. And then he asked about the therapy component of their sessions. The therapy component, He asked about whether she gave Lindsay therapy, and she said yes, supportive therapy. In other words, listening, validating, offering hope. But he pointed out that this therapy was usually just a few minutes, and she told him it varied. But he pointed out that the records listed 17 minutes. She explained that the 17 minutes referred only to the therapy portion, not the full session. He kept pushing, asking what supportive therapy even meant. She described it as listening to concerns, providing emotional support, validating feelings. She said, in other words, quote, I listened to her concerns and provided support. I tried to provide her hope that eventually things would improve, end quote. Next, he walked through the symptoms Lindsay reported early on, the anxiety, the trouble sleeping, the postpartum sort of decline, the timeline, the time frame. He asked how long postpartum depression or psychosis could occur. She told him typically within a year, meaning Lindsay was well within that window, right? Callan was only 8 months old. He asked what she diagnosed on September 18th. And she told him that she had diagnosed her with generalized anxiety disorder and an adjustment disorder with depressed mood. And then he moved straight into medication, specifically Zoloft. She confirmed that she prescribed 25 milligrams, 30 tablets. He tried to argue that Zoloft wasn't indicated for generalized anxiety, but she disagreed, saying it was effective for generalized anxiety disorder. He asked whether she knew what the manufacturer listed it for, and she said that she was aware it treated various anxiety disorders and major depression, both. He kept circling back to alcohol, asking whether she knew what Lindsay drank, when she drank, how much she drank. She told him she wasn't concerned about alcohol misuse and that Lindsay's intake was minimal. She described it as calming for Lindsay. Then came the black box warning. He asked whether she told Lindsay that Zoloft carried a risk for ideation, both suicidal and homicidal. She explained that the warning applied to children and young adults under 24, so she did not emphasize that because Lindsay was older. So he pushed the idea that the risk could extend beyond 24, but she told him she didn't believe there was evidence of that. He asked what research she'd done on Zoloft and ideation, and she said that her training covered SSRIs extensively. He asked whether she had attended postpartum symposiums or continuing education programs, meaning CEs. That's where you get your CEs. She said that she hadn't, but she'd done a lot of reading on her own. And then he returned to informed consent. Take a listen to this.
And what is informed consent? What does that mean? In a medical sense, not just like out in the street or something.
Explaining to a patient the risks and benefits of treatment and possible alternatives, and making sure that the patient understands what you're saying.
Now, when you were going over the symptomology or when you were going over the side effects of Zoloft, one of the side effects of Zoloft is, and I quote, severe trouble sleeping, right?
Yes.
Did you tell her that?
Well, insomnia is listed as a side effect.
No. You already said yes. You know it. Did you tell her that Zoloft has a side effect of giving the patient severe trouble sleeping? That's all.
So I didn't use the word severe because it typically doesn't cause severe trouble sleeping, but I thought you were referring to when she told me that she did have severe trouble sleeping.
Well, that's what she told you, right? That she had severe trouble sleeping, right?
She told me.
Yes. And you know that one of the side effects of Zoloft is, let's say, trouble sleeping. You know that, right?
Yes.
Your answer is yes? The jury has to be able to hear you.
Yes.
And why would you prescribe Zoloft to a young woman who's postpartum, who's coming to you with anxiety, who's telling you she can't sleep, she's got all of these symptoms, and you prescribe a medication that would have a side effect of trouble sleeping?
So Individuals have very varied responses to medications. Some have no side effects, some have one or two. It's impossible to predict, but Zoloft is a top choice, a first-line medication for
Says
her.
who? Says who?
Says it's the general consensus.
Well, you know about the
psychiatrists.
lawsuits against
So
Zoloft,
again,
right?
Again, you can't have both of you talking at the same time. So let her finish her answer, and then I'll give you plenty of time to follow up any questions regarding her answer. So, can you finish your answer on that?
There's extensive research supporting the use of sertraline in this instance, and the general consensus among psychiatrists is that it's a first-line safe medication for individuals, including postpartum women.
How about the kids that shoot other kids in high schools and the lawsuits that come out of that against Zoloft? You ever read about them?
Overruled.
Sorry,
You didn't get it?
I wasn't sure what the question was.
The question was, in response to your observation about how all psychiatrists or psychiatrists think it's a very, very safe, wonderful first-line drug, and you researched it. How about the kids that kill other kids in schools with the lawsuits that arise out of the use of SSRIs? Have you ever researched that?
I don't know much about that.
You know about the SSRIs and messing with someone's brain, they go out and they shoot people for no reason, right?
I'm not aware that that's linked to SSRIs.
So you didn't really talk to her about increased risk of suicide. The 24-year-olds are down because she's 4 or 5 years older than that. You didn't talk to her about the trouble sleeping that can be a side effect. But she describes that there's other drugs that you could have given her that would be perfectly safe and calming and allow someone with no psychiatric history to sleep better, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so you prescribed her with the Zoloft. It was 25 milligrams, right?
Yes.
And when you prescribed her with the Zoloft, 25 milligrams, was that increased up to 0.05 milligrams, or did you increase it at some point?
The instructions were to increase it to 50 after 1 week.
After 1 week?
Yes.
And you expected that she would listen to your instructions, right?
Yes.
And she did, right?
She waited about a month, but then yes, she did.
Why did she wait a month?
I think it took her some time to decide whether that was truly what she wanted to do.
Right, she was afraid of the drugs, wasn't she?
She was afraid of side effects.
And she didn't want to take the pills, did she?
She eventually did want to take the pills because she wanted to feel better.
A month later, right?
Yes.
So you prescribed the Zoloft, SSRI, and then you tell her after a week to increase it, and she doesn't take that medication for a month, correct?
Correct.
And then she did take the medication, right?
Yes.
And did you meet with her or talk to her before she actually started to implement that particular regimen?
I had met with her beforehand, but I was not aware of when she made the decision to go ahead and take it.
So you met her on the 15th of September, right?
Yes.
When was the next time you met her?
Can I check?
Sure, of course, absolutely. You can look at anything you want.
September 28th.
And on September 28th, did you discuss with her the fact that she was afraid to take the Zoloft?
Yes.
And did you recommend that she do that?
Well, she said that she was feeling better at that point, and
It's a real easy question. When you talked with her, did you recommend that she increase or take the Zoloft?
At that visit, I don't think that I did.
Okay, so when did she actually take the Zoloft?
She told me in her October 20th visit that she had taken it 1 week prior.
And she told you that when she increased it in accordance with your instructions, she went off the rails, right?
I don't think she used those words, but she had.
What words did she use for you as her doctor?
She felt awful.
Awful. Why did she feel awful? Did she have a stomachache? Did she have a headache? Why did she feel awful?
She did have some stomach aches. She had some diarrhea and had a difficult time eating. She also had increased anxiety. She had some more depressed feelings. She had more difficulty sleeping.
And what was your advice to her as her doctor on the 28th of October, after she told you about the effect that Zoloft had on her?
I told her to stop it, stop the medication.
Well, Reddington pushed her on whether stopping an SSRI abruptly was safe, and she explained that at 50 milligrams, it was fine to stop immediately. He asked what happened next, and she said that Lindsay fell back to her baseline, still not great, and was considering a new medication. He asked whether Lindsay had researched medications herself. Tuff said no, and she gave a recommendation. So he keeps circling back to sleep, right? Because we know that Lindsay was not sleeping. And he kept pointing out that Zoloft can affect sleep and that Lindsay already struggled with insomnia. She explained that side effects are temporary for many people and that Zoloft is still a first-line choice. And then he tried to test her knowledge of these medications, throwing out drug names used in labor and delivery. She did not recognize them. And he used that to draw a line between what she wasn't expected to know and what she should know as a psychiatrist. She told him she didn't expect Lindsay to understand a lot about psychiatric medications and that it was her job to guide her. He asked whether she knew Lindsay had postpartum anxiety after her second child. She said yes. He asked whether she documented the side effects Lindsay had back then, and she said she didn't write them down because they were common, they were temporary. So he kind of explains this though as another failure, saying she didn't remember them because she didn't document them. Yet she prescribed Zoloft again in 2022. Then he moved into the emotional side of Lindsay's symptoms. He asked whether Lindsay used the word overwhelmed during September, October, November. She said yes. He asked whether she believed Lindsay was simply overwhelmed by having 3 kids. Tuff said no. She knew Lindsay was genuinely struggling. He asked what therapy she gave Lindsay during those months. She said supportive psychotherapy, listening, validating, encouraging. He pushed her to be specific, and she told him she didn't remember the exact words because they varied by session. And then came December 1st, the first time suicidal thoughts entered the picture. Tuff said Lindsay denied being suicidal. She described it saying that, quote, she denied feeling suicidal, but felt that she was getting close to feeling that way, end quote. So that she wasn't, but getting close to feeling that way. She explained that Lindsay was afraid she might eventually develop those self-harming thoughts. He asked how frequently those thoughts occurred, and she said she didn't have the frequency documented, but she usually asked that question.
Would you agree with me that many times patients, especially psychiatric patients, may minimize their symptomology?
Patients sometimes do.
And sometimes when a woman has just had a child and has other little kids at home, they're worried about the government taking kids away from them because you're a mandated reporter, right?
Yes.
You're a mandated reporter, right?
I am.
And if she told you, I'm having suicidal thoughts, I'm close to it, homicidal thoughts, you'd report that, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. I think it really depends on the context, but having suicidal thoughts alone is not a reportable condition.
All right. So basically, you know that she was close to having suicidal thoughts to kill herself, whatever that means. We don't know how frequently she was having them. Yeah?
Today, I don't know how frequently, but at that point, I believe I did know how frequently they were.
Oh, okay. So as a result of that, you then gave her therapy, I imagine, right? Through the television.
Yes,
And what therapy did you give her in November of 22?
I gave her supportive psychotherapy.
And what does that mean? It sounds great. What do you do?
It's listening to the patient and providing.
Sorry, listening to the patient, like when they say they're having,
Hold on. Sustain. Next question.
so,
She didn't finish the answer.
Next question.
thank you, Dave. Listening to the patient, that would be when, for example, one of your patients tells you, after all the treatment that you had provided prior to that, all the symptomology that she had, insomnia, anxiety, and all of that she's close to having suicidal thoughts. That would, I imagine, impacted you.
Yes.
So what did you do with this psychotherapy?
So I provided emotional support and validation
What
and
does that mean? Validation?
encouragement.
What does that mean?
Something like, I understand this is a very difficult time. It really, it varies on the individual.
Sure, how about Lindsay?
I don't remember the exact therapeutic words that I used.
Okay. How long did you give the therapy? Validation and all that stuff?
I don't remember exactly the duration.
About 10 minutes?
Maybe
Through the television, right?
through the computer.
So, as we pointed out, you tell the people that come to see you, when I say you, I mean collectively Astor Medical, that you would expect that if a person is in crisis, as you guys say, or is suicidal, that they would have to go to a computer or their cell phone, right? They would have to punch in your office, right? Look up the number.
We advise them to call 911 or go to the emergency room as quickly as possible.
How about suicide hotlines? Do you give them advice to call them?
That's an option as well, yes.
Sure. Did she call suicide hotlines?
I was not aware that she did.
Did you ever ask her?
I don't think I specifically asked that
How about
question.
non-specifically? Did you ask her anything? Did you beat around the bush maybe? You ask her anything about suicide hotlines?
I don't think I asked her about suicide hotlines.
Would it surprise you to know that she called suicide hotline in that time frame, not once, but twice, and was turned away? You guys were in the front line of this, aren't you?
No, overall.
It does surprise me, yes.
It does what?
It surprises me that she called them twice.
And you never asked her if she had ever called the suicide hotline, did you?
I don't think that I did.
Yeah, I understand. You're a doctor. You were trying to do the right thing. You obviously, this is just horrible, isn't it?
Yes,
She continued on with her treatment with you, correct?
yes.
Well, after that, he moved into medication changes. On October 21st, she prescribed Ativan. On October 26th, she added buspirone. And then he asked about side effects, and she said buspirone was generally mild, maybe tiredness, dizziness, or an upset stomach. He asked whether Lindsay was taking Ativan at the same time, and she said yes, and that Lindsay was compliant. Tufts also agreed that Lindsay had been taking Benadryl as needed, over the counter, one dose at a time. Reddington pushed her on whether she asked if Lindsay ever increased it. She said she didn't remember asking. And then he went into the interaction between Benadryl and Ativan, pointing out that the combination can depress the central nervous system. She tried to explain the nuance, but he cut her off, insisting on a yes or no answer. He asked whether she discussed that interaction with Lindsay on October 26th. She said that she did not recall. And from there, he circled back to those thoughts of self-harm. On October 26th, Lindsay denied ideation, and Tufts had it documented exactly that way. Patient denies ideation, self-harm ideation. He tried to draw a sharp line between ideation and being close to those self-harming thoughts, and reminding her that Lindsay had told her she was close to feeling self-harming things, feeling suicidal at the previous visit. He asked whether she followed up on that, and she said yes. And Lindsay told her that she wasn't feeling that way anymore. And then he asked about how long that appointment lasted. She said that the full visit was 25 to 30 minutes, even though the therapy portion was shorter. Then he moved into hydroxyzine. She prescribed that on October 26th as an alternative to Benadryl. He walked through the list: Benadryl, Ativan, buspirone, hydroxyzine, basically a cocktail of interacting drugs. She explained that they weren't meant to all be taken at once. He asked whether she ever told Lindsay to keep a diary of her medications or side effects. She said that she didn't instruct her to do that. He asked whether she recommended it. She said no. Remember, Lindsay did it, though, for herself. She explained that they met frequently and went through everything during their appointments. He painted the picture that Lindsay was getting worse heading into November, crying more anxiety, more insomnia, brain fog, and worrying about self-harm. Tufts didn't recall those symptoms being significantly exacerbated in that exact window. He asked about brain fog, and she described it as a subjective feeling, something like slowed thinking or trouble finding words. He asked whether she considered brain fog a potential medication side effect, and she said it depended, because brain fog can also be a symptom of depression. Then he moved into Ativan. He originally prescribed 0.5 milligrams. Lindsay said it helped a little. Tufts told her she could increase it by 1 milligram. Lindsay did increase it. And then the next appointment was October 31st. Now we're at Halloween. But that note belonged to Lindsay's therapist, not Tufts. So the next time Tufts saw her was November 2nd. And on November 2nd, Lindsay told her she was hesitant and scared to take buspirone and hydroxyzine. He asked whether she counseled her about that fear. She said yes, explaining the risks like sedation or dizziness. He asked, having sound issues again. Feedback. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for letting us know. We're trying. Yeah, Lily is, clearly she's a very hyper dog. She's running around hitting the wires. I wish we could blame Lily right now, like the dog ate our homework, but clearly Lily is innocent back there. So no blaming Lily. Better? Better? Okay. Yay. Yay. All right. Okay. Yeah. We're back. All right. Yeah. People wondering whether I was a robot or not, a coughing robot. Yeah. No, I'm here. And the mic problems can prove it. All right. So we were talking about sedation or dizziness. And then Reddington asked whether she asked about suicidal thoughts at that visit. And she said yes. And Lindsay denied. He pressed her whether she checked a box or whether Lindsay said the words. She didn't remember the exact phrasing. More feedback issues. But they discussed self-harm directly at that moment. He asked when those thoughts came up again, and she told him it was December 1st, the same date that she'd mentioned earlier. And then he moved into Remeron. She had discussed it with Lindsay as an alternative, but did not prescribe it. He asked whether she recommended it. She said no, explaining that medication decisions were collaborative, right? But ultimately, Lindsay's decision. And next came the November 22nd appointment. Lindsay told her that she'd gone to South Shore Perinatal Clinic. Tufts said that Lindsay explained that the clinic specialized in perinatal conditions. He asked whether she knew the names of the providers. She said Lindsay mentioned Julie Paul. And then later she heard the name Nurse Gelada. He asked whether Lindsay was still using Ativan and Benadryl. She said yes. He asked whether she had told Lindsay to taper off Ativan. She said that she had asked her to taper off the Ativan, reducing it by 0.25 milligrams every 2 weeks. He asked whether Lindsay followed that taper. She said Lindsay had not fully stopped. He asked whether Lindsay had gone to any emergency rooms. She said that she knew Lindsay went to Mass General for depression and was discharged without being admitted. He asked whether she had access to South Shore's records. She said no, because they were a separate clinic. And so then he asked whether Lindsay could have signed a release. She said yes. He asked why she didn't request the records. She said that she didn't feel it was necessary because Lindsay provided detailed information about her treatment there. So he challenged whether Lindsay was an accurate historian given her mental state. And Tufts said Lindsay recalled medication names, doses, and dates with precision, which showed that she was capable of providing accurate information. And then he asked how many times she spoke with Lindsay's husband. She said only once, during a telemedicine appointment on December 16th, or as Kevin Reddington says, the television. And that's where the judge paused things for the morning recess. And then when court came back from recess, Reddington picked her up right where he had left off, drilling into the October 20th appointment, the day Lindsay told Dr. Tufts that increasing her Zoloft dose had sent her spiraling. Tufts looked at her notes and walked through what Lindsay had reported. She said, quotes, she felt awful, couldn't sleep, had insomnia, didn't want to eat, was having diarrhea, more depressed, crying all day yesterday, mental fog, terrified to start something new, was all in quotes. Her anxiety had spiked too. Lindsay told her that racing thoughts kept her up overnight, that she felt paranoid she might get self-harming thoughts, that she didn't want to be alone because she feared something bad might happen. Tufts agreed she was concerned. She said that she gave Lindsay therapy alongside the medication discussion, listening, validating, trying to help her process everything she was feeling. Lindsay also told her that her mother was coming to stay with them. Tufts said she knew the mother was coming to provide support, but she didn't know how long she stayed. She didn't know she slept in the basement and didn't know she slept with Lindsay. She hadn't asked. She said Lindsay was still able to advocate for herself, so she did not typically reach out to parents of adult patients. So after hearing how badly Lindsay reacted to Zoloft, Tufts stopped the medication and planned to monitor her closely. She saw her again the very next day, October 21st, and she also recommended fish oil and other natural supplements. And she started looking into other options like IV infusion treatment for postpartum depression. She explained that Zolresso required a 60-hour hospital stay and wasn't something that she could prescribe herself. She said that she researched where it was offered, Women and Infants Hospital in Rhode Island, but she never accessed their records and never formally recommended the treatment. She said Lindsay later attended a partial hospitalization program at the same hospital, and she advised her to discuss this infusion therapy with them. Reddington pushed her on why she didn't request records from women and infants. She said Lindsay didn't receive treatment there, so she didn't think it was necessary. He pushed again, asking why she did not request records from South Shore perinatal either. She said Lindsay gave detailed information about her treatment, so she felt she had what she needed. Then he moved to October 26th. Lindsay told her she felt back to where she'd been before Zoloft, still not great, and wanted to consider a new medication. That's when Tufts added the buspirone, continued Ativan, and added hydroxyzine as needed. She said that she discussed side effects. She also mentioned Remeron and as a future possibility, but did not go into detail. And then, again, came Halloween, October 31st.
All about them.
So here you have a patient who's already reported to you as a psychiatrist that she's got suicidal ideation, worried about suicide, worried about killing herself days before October 31st, and a suicide assessment was done by McAllister, right?
I wasn't there. You would have to ask her.
Well, maybe I will if she
Okay.
comes in.
Okay.
Why don't you tell me what the record shows? Did they do a suicide assessment? Did she check off the little boxes?
I'm looking for that section. It says that patient denies suicidal or homicidal ideation at this time.
Okay, so again, this is on October 31st, right?
Yes,
The patient, within a period of a couple of days and meetings with you, that McAllister has access to because the records are within your business, right?
it's not my business, but yes.
Has reported suicidal ideation and fear and dwelling about killing herself and afraid of those thoughts, right?
I just want to be absolutely clear. So yes, a little
Yes, the
while
answer is yes.
earlier, she had voiced those concerns.
Right. So as a result of voicing those concerns, is it your understanding that McAllister did not do any of the suicide assessment questions because Lindsay reported that she wasn't suicidal?
It appears that she asked about
Right, you already
suicidality.
told us that. I'm asking you about, excuse me,
Hold on. Ask the next question. Go ahead.
thank you. I'm not asking you, you told us 3 times now that she said she was not suicidal when she spoke to McAllister. I'm asking you about the suicide assessment for the 3rd time. You see it in front of you?
Yes,
Okay. Can you tell me, did Lindsay answer any of the questions that were asked over the 2 pages, possibly 3, of the suicide assessment? Yeah, 3, done by McAllister.
I don't see anything written here.
So was there a suicide assessment?
I don't know because I wasn't there. I don't know what the
And you don't know
conversation
from looking
was.
at the records, right?
From looking at the records, I don't see evidence of additional suicidal questions beyond asking if it was there or not.
So a suicidal assessment, doctor, is in the medical records. It consumes almost 4 pages, does it not? Yes?
Yes,
Okay. And all of the questions, like asking, have you felt life is not worth living? Is death something you thought about recently? Are you dwelling on that? What leads up to the thoughts? What are the thoughts? All those questions, right? For 4 pages, right?
yes.
And there is not one notation indicating that that test was ever administered to her on October 31st, correct?
Correct. But it looks like it was asked another way.
Well, from there, first off, how's the audio? We did a little switch of an audio box. Lily back there helped us, as you can see. She's working real hard. So I hope our audio is better. Testing, 1, 2, testing. Making sure. Anyway, from there, he shifted into metabolism, asking how she determined how Lindsay's body was breaking down psychiatric medications. And she explained that psychiatrists don't typically test metabolism directly and that blood tests aren't used for that purpose. He asked about genetic testing, specifically the CYP450 system. She said that the testing existed, but wasn't clinically useful enough to guide medication choices. And he asked whether insurance covered it. She said sometimes. He asked whether she used it. She said no, because it wouldn't have changed Lindsay's treatment. He then moved into thyroid function. She explained that thyroid levels don't impact her evaluation of postpartum depression. He asked whether she knew about the peer-reviewed study on thyroid function and postpartum psychosis. She said no. He asked whether she'd written any articles on postpartum depression, anxiety, or psychosis. She said no, explaining she was a clinician, not a researcher. Reddington kept pressing on what he saw as gaps in Dr. Tubbs' medical investigation. He asked whether she'd read specific articles about thyroid function and postpartum psychosis. She told him that she had read many articles over the years, but not that particular one. Then he went back to the idea that she had not ordered blood tests or the P450 testing. She told him again that those tests would not have changed treatment because they don't yield clinically useful information for psychiatric medication choices. Well, then he pivoted to thyroid levels, asking whether elevated thyroid numbers would matter. She said if she learned a patient had abnormal thyroid levels, she'd advise them to speak with their primary care doctor or an endocrinologist. He asked whether she ever recommended that Lindsay see an endocrinologist. She said no. He pointed out she wouldn't have known whether there was a thyroid issue because she didn't order blood tests. She told him there was no clinical reason to order them. And from there, he moved into the November 2nd appointment. She confirmed that she still diagnosed Lindsay with generalized anxiety disorder and adjustment disorder with depressed mood. She noted that Lindsay's condition appeared to be improving. She documented a taper plan for Ativan, decreasing to 0.75 milligrams for 2 weeks and then 0.5 milligrams for 2 weeks. She also noted the standard emergency instructions: go to the ER, call 911, call the hotline if she felt at risk. In other words, she had options. He asked whether that emergency language was just a button she pressed, but she said it was advice given to every patient. He pointed out that she had discussed 4 possible medications on November 2nd: Remeron, trazodone, hydroxyzine, and I'll work my best on this one, pregabalin. Hydroxyzine, trazodone, Remeron, and pregabalin. And she said that those were just options that they were considering, not medications that she was starting. Just they were talking about them. Then we get to November 22nd. She confirmed she asked about self-harming thoughts and that Lindsay denied them. He asked about whether she asked about how things were going at home with her parents staying there. She said that she didn't think she asked. December 1st was the next appointment, and by then, Lindsay had transferred to South Shore Perinatal. Tufts reminded him she did not have access to those records. She only knew what Lindsay reported. Lindsay told her that she had tried tapering Ativan, but that's when her sleep worsened, which means Ativan was helping her sleep. She had tried trazodone between 50 and 150 milligrams, another medication that's supposed to help you be able to sleep. It didn't help. She tried Remeron. She tried Prozac, 10 milligrams, but couldn't sleep and had worse sleep. So that was stopped. She was also on Klonopin. And then came the intrusive thoughts, those intrusive thoughts. Tufts described them as worse depression and intrusive thoughts, feeling like I'm going to die. Lindsay told her she was close to self-harm ideation and feeling hopeless. Hopeless is frightening. Tufts documented it exactly that way too, writing, quote, denies ideation, but yesterday close to it, feeling hopeless, end quote. That's what she wrote. She said she gave therapy, validation, reassurance, reminding Lindsay that there were treatment options like partial hospitalization programs. He asked whether she ever suggested Lindsay come in person instead of telemedicine, aka the television. She said no. She didn't feel like she was missing anything by seeing her on video. He asked whether COVID was over by then. She said people were more comfortable than, meeting in person, but it was still something that they thought about. He pointed out that her notes said they discussed Seroquel. She said they talked about it because Lindsay's other providers had recommended it. Seroquel is, again, it's an antipsychotic. He asked whether she discussed undiagnosed bipolar disorder. She said yes, actually, to that, because Lindsay had extreme reactions to the SSRIs and severe insomnia, which would maybe point, right, to undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Her note said, quote, also discussed the possibility of undiagnosed bipolar disorder given extreme reaction to SSRIs and insomnia. She wrote that. He asked whether she diagnosed bipolar disorder. She said no. Lindsay never had mania, she said. He asked whether she discussed a drug called Lamictal. What? Lamictal. Thanks, guys. Lamictal. She said yes, explaining that it was used for mood disorders. He asked what the plan was after that December 1st appointment, and she said she wasn't prescribing medications at that point, but she recommended a partial hospitalization program at HRI in Brookline. Lindsay ultimately went to the Women and Infants Hospital for 1 day. We know that. Those were the records Tough, though, did not have because she never got those records. He asked whether she used the DSM-5 criteria. She said yes, that's for psychologists and psychiatrists. He asked about the difference between mania and hypomania. And she explained that mania requires 7 days, hypomania 4. And then we're to December 16th, almost a month away from the horrific day. A little bit over. Lindsay told her then, just a little over a month before that day, that she was having a really rough time. Tufts added that she was sleeping but still feeling poorly. He asked why she mentioned sleep, and she said it was an important detail. She read from her notes again. Quote, very depressed during the day, no motivation. Some SI, meaning self-harming ideation, went to MGH emergency room for SI. So she goes in the ER for that. Declined inpatient, feeling hopeless, feels like depression related to Seroquel. End quote. That's fascinating. He asked whether some SI meant, right, that ideation. She said yes. So in other words, she went to the ER for that because that's how bad it was. He asked what this ideation meant in this context. And she said she asked Lindsay follow-up questions, whether she had intent or a plan to follow through. Lindsay denied both. No intent, no plan. He asked what therapy she gave. She said she explored what those feelings meant and discussed what to do if they worsened, like going to the ER. He asked whether Seroquel came up. She said yes, they talked about it, but she wasn't prescribing it. He asked whether she knew Lindsay had confessed to her husband that she was thought of harming the children. And she said no, she did not share that with her. He asked whether she would have been concerned about that. She said yes. He asked whether she would have called DCF, Department of Children and Family Services. She said that she might have, which I'm going to pause and point out. That's one reason some people don't fully share everything going on in their lives, because if Lindsay's feeling like a terrible mother and she has thoughts of harming her children, the last thing she's probably going to want is DCSF showing up at her house, right? Anyway, I'm not saying that's why she didn't mention it. I don't know why she didn't mention it. I'm just saying that sometimes that is why people don't mention it, sadly, when they are there to help, right? And DCF could have helped. Anyway, then Kevin Reddington asked whether she had ever talked to Patrick Clancy again. And she said no, he never called her. And she only spoke with him once during that telemedicine visit that she believed was December 16th. He asked what Lindsay told her about being depressed that day. And she said that Lindsay told her she was having a really rough time. Her affect was flat. It's almost what she's like every day in the courtroom. Her mood was depressed. He pointed out that her template included a section for recent lab work. She explained that Astor didn't have a lab. The template auto-populated with, quote, no lab results found. He asked what, quote, symptom reduction and improved functioning meant. So she explained it meant fewer mental health symptoms and better day-to-day functioning. Then he asked whether she told Lindsay that. She said yes. Then he asked what she actually told Lindsay that day, and she said she told her to go to the partial hospitalization program, like go there. And if she felt at risk of hurting herself or anyone else, she should go immediately to the emergency room. So by the time the questions got to the December 16th appointment, the pattern was familiar. Lindsay sat in front of her computer, exhausted and overwhelmed, and Tufts tried to figure out how to help her through a screen. That visit lasted about 30 minutes. Tufts said the therapy she offered was in the conversation, which included reassurance, validation, guidance, the same recommended emergency instructions that she always gave when someone was struggling. The plan that day was for Lindsay to follow up with Women and Infants Hospital Tufts said that she believed Lindsay did go, but she didn't know the exact date. She also noted that they were considering another drug, brexanolone, the infusion in Rhode Island, but that never materialized. Her notes from that day showed a few medication changes, that Lamictal was started at 25 milligrams, Seroquel continued, and Lindsay told her that she was on 200 milligrams, prescribed by another provider. Tufts didn't verify the bottle or even call the pharmacy. She simply went by what Lindsay reported. The standard emergency language appeared again in the note, the part that says if she has urges to harm herself or if she has urges to harm others, she should call 911 or the crisis hotline. That template showed up in every visit. When Reddington asked whether Lindsay's parents were still staying with her, Tufts said that she was not sure. He asked whether she ever reached out to anyone besides Lindsay to understand how she was doing. Again, she said she only spoke to Patrick Clancy once. She remembered him saying Lindsay wasn't doing well and that he believed Seroquel was making things worse. She said that he may have said she looked like a zombie. After December 16th, the next appointment was January 6th. Tufts explained that Lindsay likely scheduled that one herself, usually the hospital coordinates discharge appointments, but she wasn't certain. Lindsay had just spent 4.5 days in the locked unit at McLean. She had admitted herself because she was not doing well. So in other words, she took her advice. She went herself to inpatient. And Tufts said McLean diagnosed her with major depression, which was different than what Tufts had diagnosed her with. They discontinued the Seroquel. She received a discharge summary, just a couple of pages, not the full records. She didn't speak to the doctor who discharged Lindsay. She said she didn't know Lindsay was hospitalized until after she was released. And then on January 6th, getting nearer to this day, this heartbreaking day, January 6th, Lindsay told her she was still numb, still struggling after being hospitalized, still unable to sleep consistently. She was taking Ativan and Trazodone. The Trazodone was increased. And then 3 days later, on January 9th, Tufts prescribed diazepam. On January 12th, she prescribed Trazodone 150 milligrams. On January 16th, she prescribed amitriptyline, an antidepressant. She explained that it was older, but effective for depression, anxiety, and insomnia. During that January 16th visit, now we're getting to that week, horrific week. So January 16th, Lindsay tells her that her mood was very low. She had no motivation. She felt numb. She could force herself out of bed, but only for basic tasks. Remember, Patrick referred to her as a zombie. That's so telling. I want to talk about that in a little bit. She said caring for the baby felt forced. Tufts said she believed that Lindsay was honest and forthright throughout their treatment. She didn't think Lindsay was lying to her. January 16th note showed a diazepam taper, 5 milligrams for the last 2 nights, 4 hours of sleep followed by light sleep. Lindsay denied either ideation that day, and Tufts recommended a low dose of amitriptyline for depression. They also discussed exploring ketamine treatment. So then Reddington asked whether Tufts knew that Lindsay was researching medications constantly, looking up drug interactions, ketamine, and other treatments, and she said no. She had not asked. January 23rd, the day before.
No. January 23rd, Friday, you testified that she said her mood was depressed, and you noted that her affect was depressed and flat, right?
Yes.
She also reported that her heart was racing, right?
Yes.
She had no motivation, is what she told you, right?
Yes.
She told you that she had been feeling, numb and no emotion for 17 days straight, is what she told you, right?
I'm not sure about 17 days straight, but that's how she was feeling.
You didn't reach out to her mother and father at that point? They didn't call you, I guess, right?
No.
And Patrick didn't call you at that point, right?
No.
So she's sitting in front of her computer getting help from her doctor on January 23rd. And what did you do?
Well, I thought about how I could best help her, the medicines that she tried and what her current symptoms were. And it made sense to slowly titrate the amitriptyline so that we could get her to a dose that reduced her depression so that she would feel better.
But you increased the amitriptyline.
Yes,
That pushed you over the edge, didn't it?
I don't think so.
And that's where the court broke for the afternoon recess. Don't worry, broke for the afternoon recess. We're still going. I mean, it was the longest cross exam. Like, clearly, Kevin Reddington is showing his hand at what his defense is going to be by cross examining this witness for so long, but a very, very important witness. Because if she's going to be not guilty by insanity, her mental health doctor is everything, right? So after lunch, though, ADA Sprague gets up for redirect because we just spent the whole morning with Kevin Reddington really pushing Dr. Tufts. So Sprague stood up for redirect. And she started by going back over Tufts' training. It was like kind of like deja vu of Friday for a little bit. She starts pointing out that even during residency, Tufts was already a doctor. That is true. Responsible for evaluating, diagnosing, and treating patients on her own. That is a fact. She explained that she wasn't sitting in a room with someone telling her what to do. She handled her own cases, and if she needed guidance, she could consult an attending physician. She told Sprague that she had treated thousands of psychiatric patients over those 4 years. Sprague walked her back through the postpartum experience she had during residency, the elective she did with a perinatal psychiatrist, the year that she spent in the clinic seeing pregnant and postpartum women. Tufts explained that she followed those same patients over time, evaluating, diagnosing, and treating them throughout their pregnancies and postpartum periods. Sprague asked about postpartum psychosis, how rare it was. Tufts said she didn't know the exact statistic, but it was low. She said that she had treated many patients with other forms of psychosis, and that psychosis presents in similar ways regardless of the underlying cause. She described what she looks for: appearance, engagement, speech, thought patterns, bizarre or paranoid content, signs someone may be responding to things that aren't there. She told Sprague that she never saw any signs of psychosis in Lindsay, and Sprague also addressed the COVID questions from cross-exam. So she asked whether mental health issues stopped during the pandemic. Tufts said, of course not. In fact, they probably worsened during the pandemic, right? They were definitely getting worse for many. She confirmed she still saw patients daily during the pandemic, including outpatient care for 3 of her 4 residency years. And she explained that telehealth became a standard since COVID, widely accepted in psychiatry. She said that talking through a screen did not change how she asked questions or how she heard the answers. Sprague pushed back on the idea that Tufts couldn't see movement below the waist. Tufts said that she could still see signs of agitation elsewhere, bouncing, fidgeting, movements that reverberates through the body. Then Sprague moved through the Edinburgh scale, right? The Edinburgh scale is important. It's a testing for postpartum depression, 10 questions. Tufts not only doesn't use it, she implied she didn't know what it was. So Tufts explains that Astor used the PHQ-9 instead. And that can be a replacement for generalized depression, not postpartum, but generalized. And she used that instead because she chose it, but because also that it was standard practice. The PHQ-9 screens for depression. It can screen for postpartum depression too. And postpartum depression is still depression. The symptoms do overlap. She said that she combined the PHQ-9 with the patient's history to make her diagnosis. I will just throw out that that is true. It can be in replacement. But the Edinburgh scale is only 10 questions. It could have easily been added. But anyway, we'll keep going. Sprague asked about the importance of accurate history. Tufts said it was critical. because treatment decisions depend on what the patient reports. She explained that nurses like Lindsay tend to understand how important accurate reporting is. She also pointed out that Lindsay advocated for herself. Lindsay was scheduling appointments, right? Lindsay was going to the ER when she felt she needed help. That was a sign that Lindsay was capable of getting help and knowing what she needed. So Sprague then asked about therapy. Tuff said therapy is mostly listening, right? It's understanding what the patient is feeling. She said that she encouraged Lindsay to attend individual therapy throughout their time together. She pointed out that Lindsay only saw the therapist twice. Sprague then addressed Zoloft. She asked whether it was commonly used in generalized anxiety disorder. Tuff said yes, because it's effective, because it's safe. She clarified that the warnings of self-harm apply to children and adolescents up to age 24. Lindsay was 32. She explained that stopping Zoloft at 50 milligrams did not require tapering because it was still a low dose. Sprague highlighted that Lindsay waited a month before taking Zoloft and only took it when she decided she was ready. She said Lindsay made her own decisions, and that was part of her ability to advocate for herself. Sprague then decided to get into the intake form Lindsay had filled out on September 12th. Lindsay had listed past anxiety. She listed postpartum anxiety. She listed Prozac and Wellbutrin and marked both medications as effective with no side effects. So Sprague used that to counter the idea that Tufts failed to document history. And then we're to October 20th again, the October 20th appointment. And on this redirect, the one where Lindsay describes her reaction to Zoloft, Sprague asked whether Tufts documented the side effects, and Tufts said yes, and then she read them out loud. Quote, couldn't sleep, insomnia, doesn't want to eat, diarrhea, more depressed, crying all day, mental fog, terrified to start something new, end quote. She also documented Lindsay's fear of getting suicidal thoughts. Take a listen.
Start something new.
And so you did document the side effects that she reported to you, correct?
Yes.
You also documented in the interval history, paranoid of getting suicidal thoughts. Was that the defendant's phrasing?
Yes.
And is there a difference between someone being worried about having suicidal thoughts and someone actually having suicidal thoughts?
Yes.
And what's the difference in terms of how a psychiatrist sees it?
So that's the difference between what a patient might answer and then what the psychiatrist actually assesses. So say a patient might say they're having suicidal thoughts, but when they describe them, they're not actual suicidal thoughts. They're fears of suicidal thoughts. So that's the difference there. And I'm sorry, I think I forgot exactly what your question was.
So what's the difference in your training and experience between someone having fears of suicidal thoughts and actually having suicidal thoughts?
Well, so if it's a fear, then it means that they're not actually having suicidal thoughts. It's a negative.
And does that affect the way you proceed with treatment?
Yes, in some ways, yes.
How?
Well, you still proceed with treatment. It's still concerning, but it is a level of concern that can be managed on an outpatient basis, not requiring hospitalization.
And so, according to the defendant, she was not yet having suicidal thoughts at that time.
Yes.
So when defense counsel asked you repeatedly why you didn't document how many times she had those thoughts, she hadn't had those actual thoughts yet, correct?
Correct.
That was later in December, is that right?
Yes.
Now, she also told you that she was worried about something bad might happen, so she arranged for her mother to stay. Is that correct?
Well, she arranged for her mother to stay. I'm not sure if that was because she was afraid something bad was happening, or it just seemed like they needed more help.
Okay. So you don't recall the two being together as a thought?
Correct.
And the fact that she was struggling and arranged to have her mother stay, got support, advocated for herself, would those be protective factors?
Yes.
How so?
So if someone demonstrates that they can advocate for themselves, that they can seek help if symptoms worsen, then that shows that they have good judgment. They can be trusted to present for care if serious safety concerns were to arise.
So based on your training and experience with Ms. Clancy, where she says she's worried about getting suicidal thoughts and she has her mom come stay with her, do you see that as a positive decision?
Yes.
You were asked about not asking the defendant if she had called the suicide hotline. If a patient denies suicidal ideation, would you typically ask them if they had called a suicide hotline?
No.
And why not?
Because I wouldn't think that they would have. If a patient were to call a suicide hotline, I would think that they would be telling me they're having suicidal thoughts as well.
So Sprague clarified the medication instructions. Ativan is needed. Buspirone daily. Hydroxyzine is an alternative to Ativan. She asked whether Tufts ever instructed Lindsay to take all three at once, and Tufts said no. She asked about the Ativan taper. Tufts explained that Lindsay expressed concern about long-term use. They discussed it, and they created a taper plan together. Sprague used that to show Lindsay was engaged and thoughtful about her treatment. Sprague asked whether Lindsay ever told her about the ER visit on November 16th, the trazodone prescription, or trying weed gummies. Note that, weed gummies. Tufts said no. She said she had no way of knowing things the patient didn't report. But then we get to December 1st. So take a listen to this.
Now, on December 1st, 2022, defense asked you about that date. That's the date that she, again, said she had the fear of thoughts of suicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Up until that point, had she consistently denied suicidal ideation or intent or a plan?
Yes.
Had she consistently denied homicidal ideation, intent, or a plan?
Yes.
What's the difference? Let me ask you this. When you talk to a patient, do you ask them, do you have suicidal ideation?
Not usually.
What do you,
Not in that way.
how do you get that information from them? What types of questions do you ask?
It depends how the course of the conversation is going. I might ask if they're having thoughts of hurting themselves, if they, sometimes wish that they weren't alive. It can be a lot of different words, and sometimes I use, the patient's own words, but things like that.
And is there a difference between having thoughts of suicide versus having the intent and a plan to do it?
Yes.
And are there different types of treatment or things that you would do if someone has intent or plan to do it?
Yes, that would generally require hospitalization.
And so if Ms. Clancy had told you she had thoughts of hurting herself, or actually, if she told you that she had a plan to hurt herself or a plan to hurt her children, would you have moved to commit her?
Yes.
So Sprague addressed the October 31st therapy session. She asked whether there was any reason to administer the full ideation assessment if Lindsay denied ideation, and Tufts said no, because someone denying ideation would deny every detail in the assessment. And then Sprague asked about bipolar disorder. Tufts explained how she evaluates mania. And mania is described, she assesses it as fast speech, loud speech, hyperactivity, inability to sit still, jumping from thought to thought. She said she never saw any signs of mania with Lindsay. Once redirect finished, Reddington, right back in. He started with the HIPAA issue. Sprague had asked why Tufts didn't reach out to Lindsay's parents or Patrick, right? And Tufts explained that she didn't have a release. Well, then Reddington seized on that. Like, we knew that. Like, when you say you didn't have a release, why not? He asks whether she even asked Lindsay to sign one, and she said no. So he really pushed this idea that even without the family calling her, she could have reached out if she had had permission. Tufts repeated that that wasn't typical to contact family when an adult patient could advocate for themselves. Okay. He pressed again, though, asking why she wouldn't call the parents who were living with her and helping her. She says she stayed with her answer. Lindsay was able to speak for herself, and she was forthcoming and an adult patient. So she wouldn't typically call the parents. And then Reddington brings up that marijuana. Remember when I said, remember the weed gummies? Well, Sprague had asked whether Lindsay had ever told her she used gummies, weed gummies, plural. And Tufts had said no. Well, Reddington pointed out that Sprague had used the word, again, gummies, plural. He asked whether Lindsay had ever told her she used marijuana at all. She said no. And he reminded her, though, that she didn't have the women and infants records. And then he introduced them. Here they are. Here's the records of the marijuana, the weed gummies. And it states, are you ready for this? It states in the record, quote, in the middle of November, she tried taking a marijuana edible to help her sleep, which caused her to have increased anxiety and palpitations, end quote. So he used that to show that it was not multiple gummies. There was no plural. It was one. And Lindsay had not told her about it. So then from there, he went back to ideation, self-harm thoughts versus having self-harm plans. And he explained to her, again, what commit meant, the difference between a thought and a plan, right? She told him a plan meant knowing exactly how one intended to follow through with the ideation, their method, the timing, something researched and imminent. That would require hospitalization. Then he revisited the thyroid question. Sprague had said Lindsay's thyroid levels were normal at South Shore and Brigham. Reddington asked whether she remembered that. She said yes. He asked whether those were old readings. She said she didn't know. Then he got into pressured speech. Remember how we started this episode? It's live, about the pressured speech. So he reminded her that she had testified repeatedly that Lindsay never showed pressured speech. He pulled up the October 21st record and had her read it. Take a listen and let's talk about it.
So forget all about my sloppy writing. I'm looking here on October 21st of 22. Is that correct, right up there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And can you just read this paragraph here for us?
No sleep last night. Falls asleep after 40 minutes. Heart racing, severe anxiety. Worrying about kids, baby, sleep. Yawns, but not drowsy. Not hyper, pressured speech.
What was that? Not hyper what?
Not hyper, not pressured speech is what I meant. I know it doesn't say not, but that is exactly what I meant.
Wait, when did you see this that you noticed that it did not say not?
I don't care what it says. I know what I meant.
Well, when you wrote this, you did not say not pressured speech. You said in the medical record, pressured speech, right?
No.
Does it say that?
Yeah, the word is the word not is right before not hyper, comma, pressured speech. The
Right,
two
so
are
what does
following
comma
the
mean
not.
to you? When you put down in a medical record, heart racing, comma, severe anxiety, comma, worried about kids, comma, baby, comma, sleep, comma, yawns, but not drowsy, period. Not hyper, comma, pressured speech. That's what you wrote, right?
She did not have
Did you
pressured
write
speech.
that, doctor?
I wrote that, but you're misinterpreting my note.
Am I reading this correctly, and the jury will be able to look at it, that you put not hyper, comma, pressured speech? Did I read that right?
Yes, but your interpretation is incorrect.
As opposed to yours? Go ahead.
Just in regards to what was raised there.
Yes, just two brief. Approaching you with your records from October 21st, 2022, the section labeled speech, where there are all the boxes where you can put pressured, word salad, all of the different things. What do you check off for speech on October 21st, 2022?
Appropriate.
And defense asked you about the thyroid levels. Was it would it be accurate to state that I asked you if you were aware that her levels were normal at South Shore Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital?
Yes.
And your answer was no, correct?
No, I was not aware.
Because you don't have those records, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Do we have any clue as to how old they were?
I don't know. You're asking me about something I never saw.
Nothing further.
All right, anything further? All right, thank you, Doctor. You may step.
I want to know your thoughts on that. I mean, I get what Dr. Tufts is saying, but she meant not hyper pressured speech, because somebody actually asked, what is pressured speech anyway? It would be probably kind of like a hyper speech. A pressured speech would be when you have a lot of anxiety and you can feel someone's tone, right? Like, think about it. I have to hurry. I have this and this and this. You're not yelling necessarily. You can yell with pressured speech, pressurized speech, but you're like, I don't know what to do, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I'm running around, and you can like feel the anxiety in somebody. It's kind of hyper. It's kind of pressurized. So I do kind of believe Dr. Tufts that she meant not hyper pressured speech. Not only that, but she talks about Lindsay in the same notes yawning, and she talks about a flat affect. So those would be the opposite of pressurized hyper speech. Hyper and pressurized could be combined. So I do believe Dr. Tufts, and I do believe what she meant. I think it's an interesting thing for Kevin Reddington to grab hold of. You said that she had pressurized speech. Look here, which I don't know how that would, come into play. But yeah, you clearly tell that she was just done, and she was like, that is not what I meant. Not hyper pressurized speech. But I saw varying opinions there. I was talking to Grayson earlier about it, and I think we had some varying opinions on it. I want to know what you guys think about this. That's why I started with this, because different people are seeing this differently. And was she a feisty witness, or was she finally just done with Cross and standing up for herself? I'd love to know what you guys think in comments, in chat right now, but also in comments later. So, anyway, someone said, I don't care, but that's what she wrote. But look at your sentence. I don't care, that's what she wrote. Or is it, I don't care, that's what she wrote? That one punctuation changes your whole statement. Anyway, and what would it mean if she did have pressurized speech that day? Would that change her treatment? I don't know. The final witness of the day was Julie Paul, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She spent 17 years as a labor delivery nurse. So yeah, I thought that was going to be just Dr. Tufts on the stand the entire day, but no, we get to Julie Paul, another very important witness. And she spent 17 years as a labor and delivery nurse, earned her midwifery degree in 2006, and completed her psychiatric nurse practitioner degree in 2018. She also held a perinatal mental health certification from Postpartum Support International. In 2018, she created the perinatal behavioral health program at South Shore Hospital. Take a listen.
And so the perinatal behavioral health clinic, explain to us a little bit about how that came about.
Sure. There's a lack of resources on the South Shore for pregnant and postpartum people with mood disorders. So I really felt compelled, because I had a couple clients that really struggled with mental health issues as a nurse midwife, and really wanted additional education and being able to prescribe for them and take care of them in a proper way. So I went back, got my Psych NP, and then worked with South Shore Hospital to establish the program.
And where was the program actually located?
It was located right in Weymouth, Massachusetts.
And you said you worked with the South Shore Hospital?
Correct.
So the clinic is tied to South Shore Hospital in the South Shore Health System.
Yes, it is.
Now, when did you start that program specifically? When was it up and running?
2018 is when I started, in October of 2018.
And what, did you do that by yourself, or did you have other practitioners that were doing that with you?
Initially, it was just me. I started doing it 2 days a week, and then grew the program gradually over the next year or two.
And what makes up this program other than you?
So at the time, when it was just me, I just saw patients 2 days a week, and then gradually built up to 5 days a week. And we included a therapist in the team, 2 additional prescribers. We also worked with women with substance use disorders as well, so we had additional support that way. And then when the building grew, we also had the Bridge Clinic on the other side, and then we were on the other side of that program.
And what's the Bridge Clinic?
The Bridge Clinic works with people with substance use disorders.
And all of this is kind of under that umbrella of what's classified as South Shore Behavioral Health, correct?
That's correct.
Now, as the clinic grew, did your role there change?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
As the clinic grew to what you described as having additional therapists and other prescribers on staff, did your role there change at all?
I became the director of the program.
And as director of the program, did you still see patients?
Yes, I did.
And was that at the same level as it had before, or did it decrease because of your administrative roles?
It actually increased because I increased my hours to 5 days a week. I did have a little bit of administrative time.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about how the clinic would work for a woman who is coming in either during the birth period or prior to birth and after birth? What kinds of things would they be offered at the clinic?
So I'd receive a referral, and then the client would come in. We would do a 90-minute intake. When they left, when it was just me, I was using outside therapists, that sort of thing. But as the program grew, we had moms groups run by doulas. We had therapists that was brought in from Aspire, but part of our program embedded within our program. And I brought in 2 additional prescribers as well as nursing staff.
And when you talk about people as prescribers and your role as a psychiatric nurse practitioner who could prescribe, what were you offering to patients as part of this clinic as a prescriber?
We were offering the proper medication for anxiety, depression, mood disorders, really any psychiatric disorder that came in, mostly for pregnant and postpartum people up to 2 years postpartum. We also offered therapy focused on sleep hygiene, really looked at the whole person, not just medication management.
And fair to say that the medication is one piece and the therapy is another piece, and this is part of a team approach that you had at the clinic.
That's correct.
To address all these resources for patients.
That's correct.
So while you, as the psychiatric nurse practitioner, might have been a prescriber, were you also engaged in the therapy or psychotherapy?
I would do supportive therapy, but I'm not a therapist. I mainly am responsible for assessing, diagnosing, prescribing, but I also really understand the importance of sleep, nutrition, and exercise.
And so being that you had a history of working as a midwife and working as a nurse in labor and delivery, do you have a lot of experience with moms or women who are in that postpartum period?
Yes.
And how about your experiences with diagnosing and prescribing for women in that period? Do you have experience in that?
In the labor and delivery realm, as a nurse midwife, yes, I diagnosed labor and that sort of thing, and even depression, anxiety, not to the extent of higher acuity psychiatric conditions, but as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I did.
Okay. And as far as your role at the perinatal behavioral health clinic, fair to say that your primary patient base was all going to be women who are either pregnant or after birth?
Correct.
And a part of this team approach at the clinic, is it also to work on developing a treatment plan for patients when they come in?
Correct.
And so what encompasses a treatment plan generally?
Generally, if it were a situation where we were referring them for therapy, then we would work with the therapist to kind of bring in the client to figure out what their needs are, and then really stress whatever. The therapist works on certain aspects of the therapy that we kind of work together, but not in tandem. Kind of we talk, but not to the extent we each are in our own disciplines.
Okay. And as far as the resources that the clinic had available to you, is it fair to say that there are certain types of therapy, for instance, cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectic behavioral therapy, that are not necessarily encompassed with the social workers that you work with at the clinic?
Our social workers primarily did cognitive behavioral therapy. We did group therapy for more social support. What I did mainly was just supportive therapy.
Okay. And would you oftentimes through the clinic refer clients out to other local community providers?
Yes, we would.
Now, as the psychiatric nurse practitioner, does medication play an important role when you are dealing with a particular patient that came into the clinic?
Yes, it does play a role.
And how is it that you determine what's the appropriate medication track for any given patient?
We do proper screening, and then we do a complete interview with the client. And then based on what their responses are, together we work as a team to develop the best medication options or treatment options for that client.
When you say work as a team, does that include the patient themselves?
Absolutely. The patient is the most important part of the team.
So Paul, as many of you mentioned in the chat, yes, she knew Susan Clancy or knows her, Patrick's mother, since she worked with her as a midwife, because Patrick's mother is also in care and nursing. So on November 20th, 2022, Susan Clancy contacted her saying that her daughter-in-law, Lindsay, was struggling postpartum. So after confirming Lindsay had given permission, Paul called her that same day. So her mother-in-law stepping in, to help. Paul calls her that same day, and the purpose was to hear Lindsay's own account, her history, symptoms, and whether she'd be a good fit for the clinic. Lindsay said that she'd done well for the first 12 weeks after Callan's birth, but then when Patrick returned to work, she began struggling with anxiety. She felt overwhelmed and had racing thoughts. All things Paul said were typical postpartum experiences. Lindsay said that she had seen a psychiatrist and had gone to the South Shore ER in November 2006. It was November 16th, to be exact, 2023. She reported trying Zoloft for 1 week using Ativan and Benadryl for sleep, having questions about Buspar and being prescribed trazodone after the ER visit. And she said Ativan and Benadryl helped. She worried about dependence and had weaned herself off. Trazodone helped her fall asleep, but not stay asleep. She also said that she didn't want to be on long-term medications. Paul encouraged her to use what she already had, which was Ativan and Benadryl, just for that night, and said that they would discuss other options the next morning. They talked about SSRIs versus benzodiazepines, and Paul explained that SSRIs were preferable long-term. And throughout the call, Paul assessed safety. Lindsay denied suicidal ideation, denied thoughts of harming herself or harming her little ones, denied hallucinations, and showed no signs of delusions. She also denied drug, tobacco, marijuana, and alcohol use, and said that she had stopped breastfeeding. Paul scheduled an in-person intake for November 21st. Intakes are typically face-to-face unless there was a barrier and you couldn't make it in. Follow-ups could be virtual. She only insisted on in-person visits if someone seemed confused, disorganized, or needed labs or drug screens. At the intake, Lindsay met with a nurse for screenings and then spent an hour with Paul, and her main complaint was simple. She could not sleep. Paul said that was extremely common postpartum, so she has the typical symptoms that she is displaying. Lindsay said she felt overwhelmed at home with 3 children and that her anxiety had increased around 12 weeks postpartum. She had similar anxiety after her second child, but she had managed it with breathing, meditation, and yoga, so she was practicing some mindfulness. She said that she had tried one CBD gummy, but it did not help. They reviewed her psychiatric history, Zoloft, Ativan, Buspar, and earlier use of Prozac, propranolol, and Wellbutrin in college, which she said had worked aside from some sexual side effects. She said that she'd planned to return to work in October, but delayed it due to this anxiety. So Paul performed multiple screenings. She did perform the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the GAD-7, the Mood Disorders Questionnaire, Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, and the 5PS for substance use. Lindsay scored 21 out of 21 on the GAD-7, extreme anxiety, and 23 out of 30 on the Edinburgh scale, 23 out of 30. So in other words, the self-harm question was the only negative question. There were no substance abuse use concerns. Paul recommended starting Prozac since Lindsay had responded well to it in the past. She prescribed 10 milligrams for 4 days and then planned to increase to 20 milligrams. She paired it with Ativan temporarily to offset early SSRI activation and explained that SSRIs take 4 to 6 weeks to reach therapeutic levels. They discussed tapering Ativan once Prozac settled. So Lindsay understood the plan and asked appropriate questions, according to Paul. Paul also set her up with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, throughout the clinic with Letitia Duke, scheduling the first appointment for December 2nd. The intake lasted 90 minutes total. Paul told Lindsay she would soon be leaving the clinic because she was moving back to New Hampshire, so her care with Paul would be short-term. She transferred Lindsay's care on November 30th and communicated that through MyChart. And before the transfer, they exchanged several MyChart messages and a few phone calls. And from there, Buckingham moved into the medication change period, the part where Lindsay began struggling with Prozac and Paul had to adjust her treatment in real time.
Okay, so on November 25th, did you prescribe her some additional medications?
I did. So she wasn't tolerating the Prozac, so we had a conversation about stopping the Prozac. I gave her, she was really having a hard time sleeping, so I gave her a one-time dose of Ambien. And then I also prescribed mirtazapine, which is another antidepressant, but it works really good for sedation and anxiety. So started that at 7.5 milligrams, told her to stop the Prozac. And I also paired it with Klonopin, but I told her explicitly not to take the Ativan, just to take the Klonopin to help. It's longer acting benzodiazepine to help her with sleep and longer acting anxiety support while we got this new medication up and running.
And so in your conversations with her about her concerns about the Prozac, fair to say she reported to you that she was feeling disconnected, out of it, a little bit spacey. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so you said your recommendation at that point was to discontinue the Prozac.
Correct.
And as far as the Prozac went, she hadn't taken it for very long, had she?
She took it for 3 days.
3 days?
Correct.
And again, you had that conversation with her about kind of waiting it out for the 4 to 6 weeks. But based on what she was reporting to you, did you have any concerns about her stopping the Prozac after only 3 days?
When a client doesn't have buy-in to the medication, it's awful. It doesn't work as well. So I was working with Lindsay to try and find a medication that would make her feel more comfortable. She was feeling very uncomfortable, very anxious. And the Prozac, she just wasn't tolerating the activation from the Prozac. So mirtazapine is a little bit more calming, which I thought she would resonate with better.
Okay. And so again, this is not one of those follow-up visits on a telehealth or a face-to-face. So were you relying heavily on what she was reporting to you?
Yes.
And again, in that MyChart message, you did indicate to stop the Prozac, Benadryl, and Ativan, and don't take while taking Klonopin, right?
Correct.
And in your practice as a psychiatric nurse practitioner who prescribes medication, is it common that you have to kind of trial different medications to find the right one to work for any given patient?
Yes, it's pretty common practice in psychiatry.
And fair to say, there's no way to anticipate how a particular patient is going to respond to any particular treatment, medication treatment.
Correct.
So after prescribing the Klonopin, the mirtazapine, and giving her that single dose of Ambien, did you do anything or set anything up to follow up with her after changing those prescriptions?
I just told her she can MyChart message me over the weekend. It was the holiday weekend. So I made sure she knew I was available to answer her questions.
And fair to say she did, in fact, MyChart, you sent you MyChart messages over the course of that weekend, correct?
She did, yes.
And so starting at 7:51 on November 26th, she reported to you kind of how that night went, didn't she?
Yes.
Where she said, I did better last night. I took 7.5 mirtazapine and 0.5 Klonopin at bedtime, slept fairly well on and off until 3:45. And then she asked, do you think increasing the mirtazapine will help me stay asleep longer? I can survive like this, but would be helpful to get to sleep until at least 5. Thoughts? Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes,
Did you respond to that message?
I did.
And what did you advise her to do when she asked about increasing the mirtazapine and wanting to stay asleep longer?
I said she could trial the 15 milligrams.
And again, is that something that is common for you to do in prescribing, that maybe you have to adjust the dosage?
Yes.
Did you have any concerns that increasing the mirtazapine up to 15 would have had any issues or problems?
No.
And then again, on November 27th, you had a correspondence with her starting at 9:59 a.m., where she again reports to you how she did that night. Is that something you encouraged her to do, to just give you a nightly or like a follow-up the next day, check in to let you know how she was or what she was experiencing by way of symptoms?
I do that with a lot of clients that are really anxious. I like to make myself available to them so that they have that reassurance.
Okay. So this wasn't kind of unexpected.
It wasn't out of the ordinary for me.
And so on the 27th, she indicated she slept well, taking the 15 mirtazapine and the 0.5 Klonopin, feel rested but super disconnected with myself and reality, and describes it as a scary feeling, thinking of stopping Klonopin tonight and just taking the mirtazapine. Do you recall that?
I do.
Communication? And she acknowledges that I've only taken it 2 nights, so that should be right, okay? Or sorry, I've only taken it 2 nights, so that should be okay, right? Do you recall her asking that?
She's referring to the Klonopin, and yes, she did. She was really anxious about being dependent on benzodiazepines. So I think her goal was to not be on them. And if she was going to, the disorientation might have been because of all the sedation from the mirtazapine, which is a common side effect, which is why we chose that. And she knew that. And adding the Klonopin, maybe removing that might have helped with some of the sedative factors for it.
So did you find there to be any issues with stopping the Klonopin or her deciding not to take it after 2 days?
No, I did not.
And in fact, you indicated and told her that should help with the disorientation, right?
Yes, it might.
Okay. And so that was on November 27th. And fair to say that there was another communication via my chart on November 28th with Lindsay Clancy.
Yes, there was.
And at this point, she was asking for, or there was some back and forth about needing a note for work, correct?
Correct.
And is that something that you had talked about with her, about getting another note for work?
Yes, that's what I do that often.
And in fact, you kind of went back and forth with her, and ultimately she said never mind, that she didn't qualify for short-term disability anymore, and she's just going to be on personal leave.
Correct.
So on the 28th, there was no back and forth about her taking the medicine and the effects or how she was feeling?
She actually had a panic attack earlier in the day before those communications about work. And I recommended she take 0.5 of Ativan and go for a run. And I also recommended that she consider doing the partial hospitalization program at women and infants.
And what was her response to the recommendation for the partial hospitalization program?
At that time, she felt it wasn't going to work logistically for her or her family.
Okay. And why did you recommend maybe going for a run?
To get rid of some of the adrenaline from the anxiety. And running has been a really good thing for her in the past, and I thought it would help calm her.
Yeah, fascinating. So on November 29th, Lindsay messages at 6:05 a.m. saying that she had taken 15 milligrams of Remeron and CBD and slept only slightly better. Well, Paul wasn't working that day, but Rebecca Gelada had an opening, so she offered the appointment, right? She said that she was already in the process of transferring her patients to Rebecca and another new hire, and Rebecca's experience made her a good fit. So by November 30th, Paul formally transferred Lindsay's care. Lindsay thanked her and wished her luck. Paul said she had no further contact with Lindsay after that and no additional communication with Susan Clancy beyond the initial referral. And that is where the judge ended for the day, telling the jury that they'd pick up with cross-examination of Nurse Paul in the morning, which I suspect will also be fire, because we've been hearing a lot. I think that about the defense's defense, right? If this is not guilty by reasons of insanity. Her mental health is everything. And so I'm sure the cross tomorrow will also be fire. And we will be here to follow it all. Follow it all. I pinned a few things that I want to talk about. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you, everyone. So I see some people that said that their opinions have changed about this case. That's fascinating. I think one thing that I'm learning, I'm just going to talk about me. All I can do is talk about me. And I'll share some of your thoughts, is it's very clear to me that Lindsay Clancy was suffering with mental health. Now, that's not an excuse. There are a lot of people who commit crimes with mental health that are not excused for that. But it is clear that she was suffering something unique to me and very severe, that there was a lack of communication between doctors, that perhaps Lindsay didn't fully understand the depth of her mental health. I think that's common, or perhaps she didn't want to share everything because of shame. You know, I don't know. This comment I want to read, because I think it's interesting. Nurses are taught to compartmentalize to do their job. Lindsay probably compartmentalized her emotions and moods for as long as she could socially and at home. I think that it was in Lindsay's nature to just try to stay calm, right? To just kind of be calm. I watch her parents in the courtroom, and of course, it's very, very sad for them to be there. I can't imagine them ever showing any emotion that isn't, sadness or despair. It's so sad why they're there. But it's a very flat affect from them as well. And Lindsay is either in tears or has a flat affect. I think that when we watch old videos of her, I think that you're right. I think she is a stable, steady person. She likely was not fully grasping what she was experiencing, right? There's also the fear of people taking your children away, or of being a bad mother. If you say, I want to harm my children, I don't know. But I think what I do know, or feel confident in right now with me looking at the evidence, is that she was suffering deeply from mental illness and she was desperately trying to get help. That's where I am. Anyway, a lot of people that are in this, just because a test exists does not mean you need to use it. Some people thinking this doctor is severely responsible, other people thinking that she was doing her job. A lot of varying comments. Will she testify, or should Lindsay Clancy testify? I don't think she should, personally. No, I don't think she should. One thing that I thought was interesting too was Patrick Clancy's description of Lindsay being a zombie. That is something other than herself, right? That is somebody that gets up without feeling and goes through the emotions of what she's supposed to do when she wakes up and is not her, right? It's like saying, like, my wife is not in there. That is a description that catches me. Him saying that she's a zombie. What are your thoughts? Reddington, I'm very interested, varying opinions in whether he's going to make the jury angry or whether he's simply defending his client, or if he's rubbing the jury the wrong way. Varying opinions here. He fiercely defends Lindsay. That's for sure. Fiercely, even, touching her on the back, comforting her. I think he does a really great job, like I said, framing things. The TV is the telehealth. He kept saying that she said that she was an expert in postpartum. I went to the website and she does list expertise areas with bullet points. And then in the specific sentence, she says she has an interest in postpartum. Yes, expertise can be expert. If you are an expertise in something, you're usually an expert. But I do think it's a little bit more abstract than stating on a website, I am an expert. So I'm not saying that it doesn't mean expert, but it's certainly a little bit more abstract, the website, than Reddington explains it. And another way he framed something that was really interesting was kept saying, it's an ad, you're advertising your services. And she said, well, this is, I don't know, this is my bio that is on our company's website, a bio, but it's an advertisement. So he does have a way of using these sort of words and framing things in a way that kind of, I think, confuses people or the jury. So I also, people have mentioned his age, 74. He seems sharp, and he seems ready to defend Lindsay. I'm certainly curious what the jury is thinking. Also, I also want to address, I did an interview this weekend with Susan Smith's prosecutor. Everyone remembers Susan Smith, a woman who killed her 2 children, and she did not get the death penalty, and she was even up for parole. She's in her 50s, and she was up for parole 2 years ago. So this same prosecutor had to stand before a parole board 30 years later and state why she should stay behind bars. And she was not given parole, and he'll have to do that every 2 years now from now on. Susan Smith, a woman who lied on public television saying that a Black man had hijacked her and taken her children, when ultimately she let them drive into John D. Long Lake, and they drowned. Her 2 little boys, Michael and Alexander. And before that, I had interviewed Andrea Yates' defense attorney, and I got more pushback by interviewing Susan Smith's prosecutor and saying that there were some similarities in this case. Ultimately, the similarity is that these 2 women killed their children and have confessed to that and have admitted that. There's no other person to blame. Susan Smith confessed. So Susan Smith's trial was also a why done it trial with very different circumstances. And I pointed out the very different circumstances. I'm just wanting to explore things during this trial. A lot of people comparing this case to Susan Smith, a lot of people comparing this case to Andrea Yates. So I found attorneys on both cases to discuss so we can learn the differences and see how we feel about the evidence presented so far. And none of them have the very specific evidence that we've seen so far. In Lindsay Clancy's case, it's unique. But no, Susan Smith was not found to be suffering from postpartum. She did have a 14-month-old. It was one of the victims. And the defense argued fiercely Susan Smith's mental health. And that, I think, is what saved her from the death penalty. But Susan Smith also did some things. I want to point out that Lindsay Clancy, we have not seen in the evidence at all. Susan Smith lied to the public, tried to blame somebody else for doing this, had an elaborate story, sort of like Emmanuel Haro, for those that followed that case. She manipulated the public. She stayed and kept that story for 9 days. 9 days. She was a very, very manipulative person. She talked about her children crying for their mother, and ultimately the prosecutor believes, as do I, that she probably did experience that because it took the car a long time to drown in the lake, that it wasn't sudden, that it floated for a little bit. So I do not believe, after that interview, I do not believe that Lindsay Clancy is another Susan Smith. I don't at all. Andrea Yates, on the other hand, a woman who was actually found guilty at her first trial and then at a second trial found not guilty by reasons, of insanity. I don't know if Lindsay Clancy fits her exactly either, that there was, she had a bald spot in her hair that she was trying to rub out 666. There was a massive religious component, that her eyes had no pupils, her attorney explains, that she was completely glazed over. She too had been getting a lot of mental health, 5 children, 5 lost. So I shared these interviews for people to just explore, not for a point, not for an agenda, but because these are the cases that people have been discussing. I see right now, from what I've seen so far, and we've only heard from the prosecution, I'm seeing more similarities with Andrea Yates than Susan Smith, but Lindsay Clancy is her very own unique case. And the defense strongly believing, not just the defense, but her family and Patrick with his nonprofit, believing that this was a psychosis of sorts, that she was a wonderful mother, and she was mentally ill. And this was horrific. One second, Lily wants out of the studio. One second. I can't reach the door. Okay, we can do this. We can do this. Okay, go on now. Okay. Then Lily is free. That is interesting. You're right. Andrea Yates did wait until an hour where she was left alone with her children, right? Because she was having her mother-in-law coming over and helping with the children because she was not doing well. And in the 1 hour she was waiting for her mother-in-law, that's when she did it. You know, also Andrea Yates's defense attorney saying that he still considers her a daughter, talks to her often, visits her, and even let her know about the interview where she was supportive so that we could talk about these issues of postpartum mental health. So if there's any other interviews or cases that you'd like us to explore while we are following Lindsay Clancy, let me know. Let me know, because I think that the more we understand this case, the better. And I'd love to do some more interviews. So let me know. Yeah, I think so. Learning the differences in these cases is incredibly important. Yeah, I don't know where you guys are, but as far as the prosecution goes, they haven't shown me much more of a motive. Oh, the other big thing with the Susan Smith case is the motive, right? That she was in love with somebody, having an affair, and this person didn't want children, so he was ending this affair. So there's another motive there. In the Lindsay Clancy case, the prosecution's brought no other motive here except for that. She was mentally ill. I'm waiting for the prosecution to show more. And I haven't seen anything yet. Even her journal says she wants to connect more with Patrick and that he deserves that. And she's feeling sorry for him and wants to connect to him. But I am waiting. People are asking how Grayson is doing. She's hanging in there. It's been very difficult. She's been with family, and I believe that's helped. And so thank you for all your well wishes while she is experiencing a tragedy in her life. And thanks to everyone who's noticed the new background. It's a work in progress. Some people saying it's a little red behind me. We're going to be working with lighting and some bookshelves and some other things, but we're giving our studio here a little glow up. So thank you for those that have noticed. Yeah. Let's see what else you guys are saying. Right. Motive is not required. It's intent that matters in this case. This is, again, a why done it case. Motive, you don't have to prove motive, but yes, it would certainly help in this case, right? If the prosecution, at least, I think. What else have you guys said? Thank you to the people. All of a sudden I don't know if it was, I got a vocal fry or the witness did, but I mean, I can talk with a vocal fry if you guys like that. I can, but I'm not going to. No hair bow today. I do wonder if maybe the pushback is perhaps why. I'd be very curious as to why no hair bow. It's not the only day she hasn't worn a hair bow. There have been other days that the prosecution Buckingham has not worn a hair bow. So this isn't her first day not wearing a hair bow, but it is interesting to know that she's not wearing one. Oh yeah, a lot of conspiracy theories about Patrick. So many that I've had friends reach out that have been following this case asking, are the things about Patrick true? You know, what are they saying about Patrick in court? And the bottom line is nothing. And the one thing that I heard while I was in court, as you know, that I'll never unhear, is this 911 call. And let me just explain Patrick in it, because we have the knowledge of what's going on in the house. And Patrick is staying with Lindsay. You feel yourself getting very anxious, or I got very anxious because I did not realize how long he stays with Lindsay before checking on the children. It was actually a very large amount of time, and you're anxious because you're like, go check the kids, go check the kids. You want him to do that, and you know what he's about to find. But I can say this: he had no inkling. He had no clue. It didn't even cross his mind that she might have done something to the kids. That much I'll say. And that 911 call made it clear. He had no idea. It had not even been a thought. What if she did something to the kids? He thought he was going to run down and find the kids after helping his wife. He had no idea. So, and right, if Patrick had been having an affair, they would have been using that as a motive. Right? There's no affair. Also, people surprised he's remarried by now. It's been 3 years. So much can happen in 3 years. You know? That doesn't seem fast to me. If it had been 6 months or 1 year, I don't understand it's so fast that he's been remarried. I don't. He's a family man. He suffered the loss of his entire family. It seems like he has found love again with a doctor, and I'm happy for him. Thank you for sharing this. Studies have shown that severe psychosis is entirely absent in the vast majority of the in school. You know what? Dr. John has discussed the differences, and we'll certainly ask him. Many of you are asking for Dr. John's opinion. Yes, he is catching up. Yes, he has things to say. Yes, we're going to be doing a few shows. So stay tuned this week, because we will be hearing from Dr. John, criminal psychologist, on this channel. So thank you. Thank you to those who like this video. Thank you for those who subscribe, who support us. It means so much. We couldn't do this without all of you. Thank you to our moderators. They're amazing. These trials are crazy, aren't they? Like the going live and the moderating and the following. And our moderators are just incredible. And thank you to everyone for the really profound comments that I'm seeing and pasting and sharing what you feel. I agree with this. Defense is setting the stage for the defense case. I bet we see Tufts again. So do I. I think she'll be back on for the defense. But maybe not. Maybe he is satisfied with what she shared today. Who knows? You know, defense prosecution is quite the game of cat and mouse, right? If he brings in Tufts again, they get to cross-examine her again. So maybe he'll be content with what they did today. Thank you for watching from Sweden. All right. Okay. I think we're good. Thanks, you guys. Right. Patrick was clearly in utter shock. He never suspected it. I'll just share that. Thank you for sending your care for our producer. She's going through a lot. Thank you. All right. You guys are telling me to go rest. Thanks. I will go rest. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for being here. Until tomorrow, we'll continue following every bit of this trial, and check out like I said, our episode on both with Susan Smith's prosecutor and then Andrea Yates' defense attorney. I think both really interesting points. Shows how they differ and how they're similar in these cases. All right. We'll see you everyone. Bye-bye.